Welcome to APTA's FTA Update General Session. And now, please welcome APTA Chair Nuria Fernandez.
Good afternoon, APTA. Welcome to the general session with the Federal Transit Administration. I have had the distinct honor to meet Jane Williams 3 years ago. This is her third APTA annual, and I think that's great that she's made the time to be with us. Since joining FTA in 2017, Administrator Williams has focused on implementing Transportation Secretary Elaine Chow's 3 priorities: safety, infrastructure investment, and innovation, and in all of FTA's programs and initiatives. During her tenure, she has certified all 31 states with rail transit for state safety oversight responsibilities. Under her leadership, FTA has provided approximately $8 billion for federal dollars for 25 new projects in the Capital Investment Grants Program and allocated $125 million to the Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, my system, what can I say, for the second phase of our BART rail extension, the first expedited project delivery pilot in the country. In 2019 alone, FTA supported the public transportation industry with approximately $15 billion in formula and competitive grants to invest in American transit infrastructure. She has also overseen the agency's programs to advance innovation throughout the industry, including an initiative that focuses on new public transportation service models, integrated payment systems, and automation to improve mobility for all Americans. Here's a brief video of FTA's successes under Jane's leadership. Please, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Jane Williams, Acting Administrator of the Federal Transit Administration.
Good afternoon. And thank you, Nuria, for that introduction, and thank my team for that awesome video. You know, Nuria was one of the very first transit general managers I met when I began my tenure at FTA 2 years ago, and she has a unique understanding of the importance of a strong partnership between the industry and FTA, having previously served as the FTA acting administrator. Under her current leadership, Santa Clara Valley Transportation Authority, as she mentioned, will be the first to be funded under FTA's new Expedited Project Delivery pilot program, which I highlighted in my August trip there to San Jose to announce a $125 million allocation to VTA for their second phase of their BART subway extension project. On that project, it's important to note that VTA will be using for the first time single-bore tunneling technology, minimizing construction disruption at the ground level. And this is unique because it has never been used in America. It's been used in Barcelona a few years ago, but Nuria brings that here to the United States as she brings a lot of innovation to her job. And I can't tell you how pleased I am to work with her over the next year of her leadership here in APTA. Joining me today is Executive Director Matt Wellbus and the remainder of our FTA leadership team, including two of my non-career officials, Bailey Wood and Alex Perot, along with senior members Bob Tusillo, Henrika Buchanan, Bruce Robinson, Dana Nifosi, Vince Valdez, Celine Dalton-Cummins, and our newest member, Felicia James. We're here in New York to recognize the productive partnership between FTA and transit agencies throughout the nation, and also to discuss how we can move forward together to grow and transform as the traveling public continues to demand more. Everyone knows that MTA is one of the nation's oldest subway systems. It actually dates back to 1904, when the first 9 miles opened, connecting City Hall to 145th Street. Today, the subway covers 665 miles. That's the equivalent of driving from here to Cincinnati, Ohio. So MTA manages the largest fleet of subway cars and more buses than any other agency in North America. So counting the 3 new 2nd Avenue Subway Phase 1 stations, which FTA supported with a $1.3 billion CIG grant, the system has 472 stations. That's more stations than any other system in the world. The sheer size of MTA raises and also magnifies the challenges that all legacy systems face. Keeping this massive, aging system running is a job that is truly 24/7. And I know that our colleagues at MTA, including Pat Foy, who's here with us today, work every day to keep that system running. Let's thank them. But this afternoon, I'd like to focus on the future. As I frequently point out, Transportation Secretary Elaine Chao has made safety, infrastructure investment, and innovation her top priorities at USDOT. You know, innovation, it's in America's DNA. We have always led the world. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. And it's what we do, quite frankly, better than anyone else. It is becoming increasingly evident that the future of transit depends on innovation and how quickly innovation can be incorporated into the transit network. Today, we are just beginning to realize the tremendous potential of promising innovation across the transportation industry. As we enter the next decade, we need to continue to focus on meeting our riders' expectations. We know that with the continued development of technology, the demands of the riding public will continue to increase. And our ability to innovate and our leadership in the mobility discussion will ultimately determine the industry's ability to remain an option in the transportation network. So as I've traveled across the country over the past year, I've had the opportunity to ride many of your systems and see firsthand how many of you are expanding your services with technologies and partnerships that really truly improve mobility for your riders. For example, while traveling in Maine, I learned how the Greater Portland Metro CEO, Greg Jordan, negotiated with Maine Medical to provide free transit trips for healthcare providers and workers. Their employees are able to ride by just showing their employee badge and boarding the bus. Imagine how quick that is. The hospital is also very happy to provide a desirable employee benefit, and this reduces traffic congestion and helps with parking shortages across Portland. Similar arrangements were also made with area colleges, which demonstrates the importance of partnerships and how they can grow ridership. Since 2014, when Greg took the reins at the agency, ridership has increased by 35%. I pointed this example out to encourage all of you to continue to seek those opportunities to incorporate value capture and creative partnerships into your projects. Sometimes all it takes to get to yes is to simply ask the question. And many of our grantees have been successful in reaching out to those who will benefit from the project to help contribute, either for capital expenditures or to help operate and maintain the system. This morning, in fact, APTA released a new report highlighting the value transit brings in communities. The study focused on 7 communities across the nation within a half-mile of transit that benefited from transit investment. Through FTA's Capital Investment Grants Program, we have partnered with transit agencies in most of those areas to support infrastructure that not only raises property values, but also improves access, mobility, and quality of life for all Americans. So as you plan additional projects, also consider whether your projects are located in an opportunity zone. Our administration created this option as a way to encourage additional private sector investment in economically challenged communities in exchange for potential tax benefits. Many of the recent capital investment grant projects we have funded are supported by partnerships with multiple funding programs. For FTA support, the law requires us to consider both project readiness and associated risk in evaluating projects for funding through CIG program. Let me tell you why this is so important. It needs to ensure that project cost estimates are realistic from the start. Consider the fact when you complete projects under budget and they open for service ahead of schedule, FTA has the authority to approve additional project activities using the federal share of your cost savings if the proposed use is integral to the success of the existing project. So we want to encourage project sponsors who bring projects in on time and under budget and achieve cost savings to come to us and discuss options for that additional funding. As your partner, we want to continue to support your efforts. So please let us know if you have cost savings. We want to hear from you. In the past, FTA didn't do that. We simply took our portions of funding back to our side of the ledger. Today, we want to tell you we're willing to consider those additional savings on the federal side of the funding to help support you as your federal partner in additional local funding requests if it's integral to your project. Under this administration, we have advanced funding for 25 new CIG projects, totaling almost $7.6 billion in funding commitments. And this is an extraordinarily interesting time to be a part of the transportation field, especially the public transportation field. So as we look ahead to the next decade, transit will need to capitalize on technology to meet the growing expectations of a new generation of riders. And I am so encouraged by the innovations I'm seeing across the country. Some are simpler than others. You know, I was recently in Seattle and I toured a number of the systems, including riding a segment of Community Transit's new bus rapid transit line in Everett, which we supported with a $43.2 million capital investment grant. And while I was there, one of the buses had been recently outfitted with a new onboard bike rack. Designed after cyclists, very active in the region, were slowing down service by loading their bikes on traditional front-of-the-bus racks. So 2 in-house bus service technicians took it upon themselves to design and develop a rack that would safely accommodate bikes inside the bus to speed up boarding. So while I was riding the bus, we were actually able to witness this. And riders were easily able to get on the bus, put their bike on the bus rack inside the bus and sit down. And no slowing down of service. And so I want to congratulate CEO Emmett Heath for his leadership in encouraging his staff to think really outside the box and to meet your customers where they are. And it increased service, and it also increased their ability to ride the bus and didn't slow down the ability to deliver that service in a way that was efficient for everyone. And so I applaud that outside the box thinking that we don't always see. That's just one simple way that we can meet our customers' expectations. Because in Seattle, they want to take their bikes on the bus. In case you haven't been there, they really are serious bike riders there. I've got a few on my staff here as well that are very serious bike riders in Washington. In Houston, they want a more efficient bus ride. There, like everywhere else, the newest generation of transit riders, of which I have 2, don't want to wait. So in 2015, Houston Metro, under the leadership of CEO Tom Lambert, reimagined and redesigned the entire network. This is no easy task, but a very necessary one, because it increases service where people live and where they work. Tom took that risk to be sure Houston Metro was providing the best possible service to its communities. That redesign increased the number of routes, offering frequent service, improved bus route connections to new rail lines, and established a more grid-based system. And as a result, bus ridership increased. In fact, by 2018, Houston Metro provided 1.5 million additional trips compared to just 2015 prior to their redesign. I know many of you I've spoken to are doing similar service reviews, leveraging big data and thoughtful community engagement to increase ridership. Today, thanks to technology, traveling is becoming easier than ever. And in Philadelphia, SEPTA recently went to the next level by developing an app that provides schedules, real-time arrival information, and alerts across multiple modes, including light rail, commuter rail, bus, and trolley. It's the most user-friendly feature, is allowing riders to add to their fare cards simply from their smartphones, saving time at the kiosk, improving their mobility for the next generation who really, let me tell you firsthand, expect speed and efficiency. SEPTA reports an average of more than 200,000 app users per day, which is really great news. I'd like to take a moment to just congratulate SEPTA CEO Jeff Knuppel, who has led the agency's complex fare modernization project, of which the app is a part, and also wish him well on his impending retirement. Jeff has been a terrific partner on the Northeast Corridor Commission and a steady hand at the helm of SEPTA, and we will truly miss him. Technological advances are helping with accessibility too, and in Flint, Michigan, the Mass Transportation Authority, led by CEO Ed Benning, launched a mobility program to improve access to healthcare service for older adults and people with disabilities. Since receiving 2 FTA grants totaling only $1 million, Flint MTA has hired mobility managers who use online scheduling to help clients call for rides based on a ride-hailing on-demand service model. So in Flint, mobility managers are carrying tablets into patients' rooms and scheduling rides home and to future appointments in real time. Their work, which has been highlighted on several national stages, including here at APTA, has increased access to care and improved health outcomes in Flint. Congrats to Ed and his team for their commitment to efficient transportation for all of their members of their community. You know, innovation is one of Secretary Chow's top priorities, and she has been leading the way in promoting automated vehicle technology since her very first days at the department. And now she is leading the way to consider multimodal solutions to provide complete trips, focusing on veterans, older adults, and people with disabilities, although these solutions obviously work to improve mobility and access for everyone. We will be hosting an Access and Mobility Summit on October 29th to kick off a conversation about complete trips and how to achieve them using technology, cross-cutting strategies, and a wide variety of partners from the public and private sectors. Our goal is to devise ways to streamline the multiple steps involved in traveling between locations into one seamless trip. The summit will be live streamed, so mark your calendars for October 29th. In conjunction with the summit, I will be convening the Federal Coordinating Council on Access and Mobility to bring together our federal partners to reduce barriers to transportation coordination. As you know, we've been working to promote opportunities to improve public transportation through innovation, including investing $8 million in our Mobility on Demand program. The industry responded with dozens of applications requesting $57 million in funding from just $8 million that we have available. So I know that you all are out there wanting to innovate, and we want to support you as your federal partner. Because at USDOT, we were the first mode to embrace new service models that include partnering with car-sharing companies. One of the projects we funded under the MOD program, in fact, supported LA Metro in partnership with Sound Transit and King County Metro to explore partnering with VIA to supplement their transit routes. Under the leaderships of CEOs Phil Washington, Peter Rogoff, and Rob Gannon, the agencies worked together with VIA to find solutions to the challenge of first-mile and last-mile connections. LA Metro launched its partnership with VIA earlier this year, and now VIA runs service for passengers to and from stations within 3 service areas. Riders can call for a ride or request one using an app, and it's free during the pilot. As the program has gotten underway, LA Metro reports that passengers are taking close to 1,700 trips on VIA every week. If you're wondering how much people like the coordinated service, consider this. Riders have steadily increased, and by midsummer, the number of repeat riders reached 70%. This is a great example of how innovation and partnerships can stretch and reach the traditional transit and ultimately better serve riders' increasing expectations. The Dallas Area Rapid Transit, under the leadership of CEO Gary Thomas, also received a MOD grant to develop partnerships and introduce technologies to better serve customer travel needs. DART integrated scheduling, a cross-modal fare system, trip planning, ride-sharing, and accessible transportation services into its GoPass mobile app, which improved access to DART services, particularly in non-walkable areas not very well served by transit. We applaud Gary's leadership and innovation, which helped DART reimagine transit services and pioneer truly new practices in transit. Building on the success of FTA's Mobility on Demand program last spring, we issued a new notice of funding for our new Integrated Mobility Initiative, or IMI. Through the IMI program, we are encouraging you to think big, including the use of robotic technologies like smart canes that enable people to navigate that have visual challenges in real time. These new forms of mobility help customers with growing expectations and in turn grow ridership. We hope to release our grant selections under IMI later this year. Our shared mission to improve public transportation for America's communities would not be possible without the partnership we have with each and every one of you. Thank you for your commitment to providing public transportation to the thousands of Americans that depend on it each and every day. Now, I'd like to take a minute to introduce my leadership team, who I'd like to ask to join me on stage to discuss FTA's latest priorities and initiatives. First, Matt Wellbus. Most of you know Matt Wellbus. If you don't, you should get to know him this week. He is FTA's executive director, and he is the lead career official at FTA and the best executive director in US DOT. He is truly my right hand. He is truly my right hand and oftentimes steps into the deputy administrator role when necessary. Second, Bruce Robinson. Bruce leads our program management office, which includes most of our discretionary grant programs. Bruce is one of the most competent people I have ever worked with, and we are so very fortunate to have him managing our programs. Next to him is Henrika Buchanan. She's our Chief Safety Officer, and she leads our efforts on PTASP, and I can't be more thankful for her leadership on Secretary Chow's #1 priority, safety. I also really appreciate her intuitive counsel and her outside-of-the-box thinking that she brings to this important role. FTA is very lucky to have her. Next up, everybody should know this man's name. It's Bob Tasillo. He is FTA's Chief Financial Officer, and he is the reason you have gotten your grant payments made as quickly as possible after the government shutdown. He has a steady hand. He is a very steady hand at the helm of FTA's budget office. He processed more than 4,300 payments during the first week of the government shutdown, totaling more than $1 billion in payments. And to give you a rough idea, typically we process about 50 a day. His team processed 1,431 on day one. So that's his commitment and his team's commitment. And last, but in no means least, is Vince Valdez. He leads our research and innovation effort, and I love to introduce him as our rocket scientist. I couldn't ask for a smarter person to lead our transit innovation discussion. He is central in our discussion about our research and our programs, not only in FTA, but very well respected across our department. And we are lucky he is so forward-thinking in where transit needs to be and how we help all of you as your partner get there. So with that, I'm going to take a seat, and Matt's going to kick it off with some of his remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. I think as you all saw in the opening video that FTA is really proud to advance transit capital projects all across the nation. And as Jane noted in her remarks, our 6-word mission is to improve public transportation for America's communities. And you are all the partners, you're the visual representation here today of our partnership and how we go about doing that. And then Nuria noted that we awarded, and the video showed that we awarded $15 billion in new grants for all of our programs during the last fiscal year that ended 14 days ago. And we did that with 2,000 grants. So we awarded $15 billion in 2,000 grants, and that reflects a lot of work on the part of the people in this room, again, to support public transportation. And when you draw the lens back to our overall portfolio, of capital projects at FTA. We have 8,000 active grants. And those 8,000 grants, they have $90 billion in FTA capital construction funding in them. So all across the country, there's $90 billion in federal funding that's been at work to support transit. And we know that those funds flow to 3,000 transit agencies across the country. We know that about 70% of all those dollars flow to private firms in the transit industry, represented by people here. And we also know that the majority of our FTA funds flow through our formula grant programs. About 80% of our dollars go out the door by formula. But you may not know that at the US DOT, where there are 9 operating administrations, FTA is the operating administration that manages the most competitive grant programs. In a typical year, depending on how many research requests, funding proposals we put out there, we have about 10 notices of funding opportunity annually. And so we're an active competitive grant program agency. And as you heard Nuria note, during the last 2.5 years during this administration, we've executed multiple grant agreements. So we've executed a total of 17 full funding grant agreements for $3.6 billion. And we've allocated funding and we've awarded agreements for projects totaling $7.6 billion during that time. And so that's another reflection of the commitment that the people at FTA have under Jane's leadership to advance transit. I should just tell you that we have 500 people who work at FTA, and they are really pleased to be proponents for transit, to be your partners advancing public transportation all over the country. Thanks.
So good afternoon. I'd like to provide some more specifics about Matt's comments about FTA's infrastructure investments. FTA's other competitive programs are a vital resource for transit systems, and demand continues to vastly exceed supply. For example, in fiscal year 2019, we had almost $2.5 billion requested for approximately only $530 million available for our buses and bus facilities program, our low and no emission grant program, and our passenger ferry grant program. So applications exceeded available funding by a factor of 5. So when we're looking at these projects, we're looking at the needs and the benefits across the country. We're looking at how these projects support the community, how they increase state of good repair, or increase ridership, or how they improve access and mobility for all Americans. And then we look at some other current priority areas, including how the investments might support opportunity zones. And we also look at how the projects use taxpayer dollars with a strong local match. We're also looking to make applying for our programs easier. We know that applying for competitive programs can take some time. So for example, we worked with the National Rural Transit Assistant Program to develop a grant-making 101, and you can find this on their website. After our programs, we hold debriefings for any project sponsor that asks for one. And in the unfortunate event that you aren't successful with your application this year, I encourage you to do so too. Many projects do improve their rating after they've had the debriefing in the following year. So upcoming with our competitive program, we still have the selections for the FY19 bus facility program, the tribal transit program, and we're already in the process of developing our 2020 notices of funding opportunity. Besides our competitive programs within infrastructure, we've worked to streamline and reduce our requirements. So previously, this included reducing which grants must report quarterly and changing the threshold for real estate reviews. Right now, we are seeking your comments on the project management oversight notice of proposed rulemaking, which was last updated in 1989, so more than a couple years ago. We're working to streamline the regulation by reducing the number of projects subject to the rule. In particular, we're looking at redefining the definition of major capital project as a transit project with at least $300 million total project cost and $100 million federal investment. So your comments are due October 25th, and we encourage you to comment. We will provide more details on the rule at Wednesday's capital project workshop. And lastly, I would like to discuss improved coordination, because our infrastructure investments are only successful if they're used efficiently. Our most recent count, we've identified over 130 federal programs that fund transportation services, and unfortunately, many of these are not well coordinated. I am pleased that on October 29th, the acting administrator is convening the Coordinating Council on Access to Mobility, which is composed of the Department of Transportation and 10 other federal agencies. The CCAM, we're working to improve access to jobs, to healthcare, to education, and community services. The goals by reducing the federal policy barriers, by promoting public awareness of transportation options, and coordinating all these federal programs and the cost, and by administrating pilot programs. The same day, as Jane mentioned, the department is hosting the Access and Mobility Summit to focus on innovations and mobility services and partnerships. The summit will be live streamed, so I encourage you to check the department's website to review the report. Thank you.
So I'm sitting here and I'm trying to figure out how did I draw this selection, because I'm sitting between the guy that's allocating all of the money, right, and the guy that you all are so happy with for giving you all your money. And I'm sitting here to talk to you about the popular topic of safety. But what I will say is that I am excited to be here to discuss with you where we are from an FTA perspective with implementing our safety program. And it is an exciting time to be in safety at FTA. We finished laying out what the safety regulatory framework was last year, and now we're at the point where we're focused on implementation and how we move forward. So since we've completed the certification of all 31 state safety oversight agencies, and I'll point out we did that ahead of the April 2019 deadline, I'm often asked what's next in safety. So our current focus is on ensuring the success in establishing the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan Final Rule Requirement, or the PTAS, ahead of the July 20th, 2020 deadline. PTAS requires the development of a safety plan based on safety management systems, so SMS, and I know for years we would talk about SMS, but we really didn't know what it was. And I think with the PTAS framework, we've laid out for you how it's a safety risk hazard analysis approach that allows you to make investment and resource decisions based on risk factors associated with the safety of your system. It's not a one-size-fits-all rule. Instead, it offers transit providers flexibility when developing their safety plans. The rule applies to recipients and subrecipients of urbanized area formula funds who operate public transportation systems and all rail transit operators. And that was a shift in response to what we heard from the industry. When we looked before, we were applying it across the agencies, and most of the costs were in those small nonprofit providers that were providing 5310 and 5311 service. So when this administration laid out the final rule, we deferred action on those small operators so that we could really focus, after we'd looked at the data, the requirement, the regulatory framework, on those transit providers where we saw the most risk. So on Friday, to aid in the implementation of PTAS, FTA launched the PTAS Technical Assistance Center, or TAC, which will provide enhanced technical assistance on the development and implementation of your safety plans to eligible recipients. So the TAC is going to offer support in 3 engagement methods. 1, there's an online community of practice to facilitate information sharing and peer-to-peer engagement. 2, there's remote support from FTA to address PTAS questions and provide feedback on your draft safety plan content. And 3, for those areas where there's a more critical need or more dire needs, there can be some resources for on-site assistance to provide training and safety plan development support. So the TAC is live as of Friday, and it can be accessed from FTA's website. There are information materials and items at the FTA booth, which is located on the 7th floor in front of the Empire Complex conference room. Over the past year, FTA has provided robust PTAS outreach, including 23 webinars, attracting more than 4,500 participants, and 6 one-day workshops that we did over this summer with nearly 500 industry stakeholders attending those meetings. So to date, 62% of the agencies that are subject to the requirements have participated in a FTA PTAS webinar, training, or workshop. In fact, there are 6 states where 100% of the agencies that are subject to the rule have participated, and those are the states of Delaware, Hawaii, Nebraska, Nevada, Vermont, and Wyoming. Our PTAS web pages have been viewed over 44,000 times. We have over 50 online documents and resources that are available for you to access and download. So from now until July 2020, we will continue with a strong push for on-time implementation of the PTAS rule. As I've stated often, we provide these outreach activities to assist you, the industry. If there is something we need to do differently, please let us know. Our intent is to provide you with the resources you need to be successful. As Acting Administrator Williams detailed in her remarks, to prepare for the future, we must consider how we use today's technological innovations in ways to help our industry and ultimately riders. We are also focused on how technology can improve safety in our industry. FTA's Transit Advisory Committee for Safety, or TRACS, is focused on this issue. This time, they are researching innovative technologies and processes to help prevent suicide and trespassing incidents, enhance safety through employee safety reporting, and increase roadway worker protections, all by the use of technology. These are difficult issues, and we really appreciate the experienced perspective our TRACS members bring to the table. We anticipate receiving a report from TRACS by September 2020, and I'd also like to encourage those of you to consider applying for TRACS when the opportunity for the next charter is announced in 2020. We need your expertise. The last thing I want to highlight is that we've sent out a stakeholder survey that will allow us to be able to assess the industry's progress toward meeting the PTAS requirement. That survey closes on October 25th. In fact, we've been getting a lot of the surveys in, and I don't know which two agencies because it was anonymous, and I'm trying to go behind the data to see, but in fact, there are two agencies that have included their PTAS, and so I'd like to be able to recognize those agencies, so I'm going to find out who that is that's completed their homework to date.
Are they here?
So tomorrow I'll be moderating a safety session where I'll be joined by regional New York and New Jersey safety experts to talk about what they're doing in safety in their area, and I'll be able to provide more robust on what FTA is doing in safety at that meeting. So thank you.
I think we all know that transit creates value, and in communities where transit projects are planned and executed, you can expect to see a boom in development, as well as an increase in property values and greater tax receipts. In fact, our data shows that transit investments increase property values on average by 30 to 40%, and if conditions are ideal, it could be as much as 150%. Value capture, as you know, has very many strategies. I think the one that you hear most often is tax increment financing. But there are other strategies, and at FTA we take a broad view of value capture to include joint development, private contributions, development impact fees, special assessments, and now more commonly, naming rights. When thinking of value capture, I encourage you not to overlook joint development. Joint development allows transit systems to use FTA capital funds or property acquired with FTA funds to help finance the development of a project with the private sector. One example, and there's many that I could talk about, is right near our office building in Washington, D.C., the Navy Yard Metro Station. WMATA and a developer will build a 10-story mixed-use building with housing, retail, offices, and parking. The chillers for the Navy Yard Metro Station will be located on the roof of the new building. WMATA purchased the property in 1975 for $117,000, using $77,000 of FTA funds. Today, the fair market value of that property is $9.3 million. And the land sale provides WMATA with $12 million in revenues. That's just one example, but since 2014, FTA has approved 16 joint development projects, which are generating $500 million in additional revenues, with the potential for $1.6 billion in local economic development with the private sector. Because we want transit agencies to look at joint development as a value capture strategy, earlier this year, we took another look at our joint development circular, and we proposed in April some changes to the circular that we hope will encourage joint development and streamline the process. We received over 60 comments, and if you happen to submit one, thank you very much. We've looked at your comments. Some are great ideas, and we hope to publish the final circular at the end of the year or early next year. Finally, I want to put a shout out or a plug in for one of our sister departments at the department, and that's the Build America Bureau. The Build America Bureau has helped and can help finance transit projects through two major credit programs. They make loans, we make grants. The Transportation Infrastructure Finance Innovation Act, also referred to as TIFIA, and the Railroad Rehabilitation and Improvement Financing, also known as RIF. Since 2014, 15 transit TIFIA loans have been made, valued at $8 billion, to help finance projects costing $29 billion. This is heavy rail, light rail, positive train control, and maintenance facilities. On a smaller scale, the RIF program has helped support transit by making $2 billion of loans for costs about $12 billion, which includes positive train control and commuter rail. We also have at least 6 other transit projects that have currently submitted letters of interest for the TIFIA or the RIF program. And finally, we've been looking at ways to reach out to rural communities, and we're partnering with the Build America Bureau under what we're calling a Rural Project Initiative. This project will again look to rural areas with smaller projects in the $10 to $75 million range. And the benefits are, if you're a rural applicant, the application and advisory fees are waived. That's a savings of between $250,000 and $500,000. The interest rates for a rural loan is half the interest rate of a regular loan, and that is currently, as of Friday, 1%. If you can get cheaper money than that, good luck to you. Along with the lower interest rates is the fact that you can finance up to 49% of the project. So if you're interested, there's a website on the DOT webpage to direct you to the Bureau, and if you'd like to contact us at FTA, we're happy to work with you along with our friends at the Build America Bureau. Thank you.
You know, I'm with Henrique on this. I was wondering about the lineup earlier, but then I realized I'm following the money man, so I have no complaints at this point. I just wanted to refer to Jane's comments from the outset. There's never been a better time to be in the innovation business at FTA. She's embraced the idea of innovation from word go and has really encouraged us to think outside the box in terms of how we support the industry with respect to innovations and new technologies and new business models. You're all aware of the changing demographics, the changing ecosystem for transportation. I don't have to go into that in detail. But again, the idea is that we're responding to those changes, that we're putting together projects and programs that support change and that support better service for the people that we serve, the riders. Again, older Americans, people with disabilities, again, just a growing population and the dynamic that we're seeing in urban areas and rural areas around the country. And FTA does it by actually implementing 6 distinct programs that we've supported since 2015, 2016, ranging from mobility on demand. We support technology and automation. We do research in accessible transportation technologies, helping people with wayfinding, people with navigation, and certainly the very important idea of multimodal or integrated fare payment. How do we get these systems working together to provide a seamless approach, a seamless experience for the individual traveler? Jane mentioned that we had put out $15 million to support that in early May. The program closed in August, or the NOFO closed in August, and we've had a rousing response to that. We were expecting that there would be a lot of pent-up demand leading up from our mobility on demand experience, and we were not disappointed. We have quite a number of projects, quite a number of exciting propositions to wade through, and we are very excited about making announcements, hopefully by the end of the year or before that, with Jane's support. As she mentioned also, there's this concept of the complete trip. Again, thinking about this framework around the work that we do and the service that we provide as an industry. The complete trip really being about removing the friction for people trying to travel from point A to point B for the very important things that they do in their lives, going to schools, going to jobs, all the things that we all want to do on a daily basis. So how do we go about removing that friction from the travel chain, if you will? How do we actually add lubrication to that? And thinking about, again, concepts of operations such as mobility on demand, new technologies that support, again, wayfinding, navigation, having the infrastructure that supports these innovations at a vehicle level, thinking about that very intricate dance of different systems that provide transportation for every individual. FTA has supported that, and with Jane's support and with Jane's rousing endorsement of our activities, we continue to do that. I'm very excited to be involved in innovation at FTA right now, and DOT is actually brimming with innovation, from our ADS grants to the CCHEM and Accessibility Summit at the end of the month. We're really supporting these new concepts of operation that promote multimodalism, that promote integrated and interoperable technologies, that support just the better concept, the better idea of providing seamless, frictionless rides and experiences, and qualitatively improving the ride experience for travelers across the country. So I'm very privileged to be part of that, and look forward to continuing that work. Thank you.
Thank you, Vince. I think, do we have Nuria back? I think we have some time for questions. We can invite Nuria back to the stage.
Well, thank you, Jane, and to your executive team for sharing such good information and some very good news, too. So I'm going to open it up for questions, but before I do, I just want to let representatives from the media know that if they have any questions, if you could direct those to Dave Longo or Bailey Wood from the FTA communications team. Their contact information can be found on FTA's website. And if you have any questions for the panel, I'll ask that you line up by the mics. That would make it easy to process since the session is running, we're almost to the end. While you do, I would like to just pose one question to the group. I see someone already lined up. And, you know, it may seem like a very long time ago, but it was just 9 months that the government was shut down. And I don't want to relive those dark days, but the reality is they were not fun. So I'm just wondering if you could share with us what processes you've put in place to ensure that we don't go through that experience again, because life does go on. Our projects do demand funding, and our programs do as well.
Yes, thank you, Nuria. You know, FTA was a very lonely place during the shutdown. Unlike some other modes at DOT, we had about 90% of our employees not there with us. And one of the things, you know, people ask me what keeps me up at night. One of the things that kept me up at night was worrying about payments getting to our very small providers, for instance, of paratransit service. I had people texting me on my personal phone, my work cell phone, saying if we don't get funding soon, we're going to close our doors and we will likely never open again. And so we worked really hard, Matt and I, talking to our OMB partners and our partners at the Department of Justice about why is it, can we not make payments to our grantees when the funding, one, has been appropriated, two, it's been allocated, three, it's been obligated in a grant, and four, you're coming in asking for your federal partner to pay our share. And, you know, in the past, we haven't done that. And so they said, you know, that's a good point. Let us think about it. We've had multiple conversations, and I'm very, very pleased to report that they agreed with us. And so even, God forbid, if there is another shutdown, you will not be asked to wait until government reopens for payments to be made to the grantees.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very good news. For those of you lined up with the mic, if you could please state your name and your affiliation. Thank you. Go
Carl
ahead.
Sidoric, CEO for the Monterey Salinas Transit District. Well, that couldn't have been a better time comment for my issue, because as you know, I was knocking on your door during the shutdown with cash, we're a poster child for cash flow crises in my district, and that is great news to hear. Thank you for all your work on that, also on the work that you did on behalf of state of California with its issues with the Department of Labor over the past year. We won't get into that. My question was really about the low-interest loan project. We received a 5339 rural grant for to develop an operations maintenance facility in a rural facility or in a rural area. We've been working with the Department of Agriculture that actually has a financing program for rural areas. It sounds like your rate actually beats them considerably. So I'm interested in what were the limits on that as far as the size of project that you had mentioned, 10 million to?
It was 10 to $75 million is the project size.
Okay.
And if you want to see me after, I'll happy to leave my card with you, and we can put you in touch with folks at the Bureau to help you if you're interested in submitting a letter of interest for the loan.
Yeah, it's been a joy working with two different federal agencies on this project, but it'd be nice maybe to work with one more if I get that sort of rate. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
What I'll also tell you is that Janine Miller, who's a senior advisor to the Secretary, came out of the Department of Agriculture and has headed up our Roots project that was recently announced last week at AASHTO with the Secretary. She would also be a really good resource for you and would totally understand the Department of Agriculture programs as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Hello, my name is Glenn Hendricks. I'm a board member for VTA. And you've been talking about projects and funding and removing friction. And here, since we're at the Transform conference, what do you see public transit looking like in the next 20 or 30 years? And what skill sets do you think we need that we don't have today?
Great.
What I can tell you, it's going to look totally different than it does today. I wish I had a crystal ball that could tell you exactly what that will look like. What I can tell you, I can't imagine anyone to lead us in that effort that's more better prepared than that than Nuria Fernandez. She was one of the first operators, as I mentioned, that I met in the industry, and she didn't waste any time in approaching me to ask for an extension in her project because she was looking to do something very innovative in using the single boring technology. And I remember thinking, wow, that's the first time in America that will be used, and how that can impact the community and the tearing up of the streets and the business community where revenue will be lost, and how innovative that was. And so, I also work for the secretary, that was the former labor secretary, and so she is very focused on workforce development. In fact, last week, Vince Valdez led our peer review, peer-to-peer exchange with our bus technicians and bus manufacturers to talk about what skills do we need to make sure our workforce needs right now in new bus technology, as well as preparing those for the future. I don't know if all of you know Lauren Skyver. She is an incredibly dynamic person, and she has created a curriculum to train bus maintenance workers on how to learn how to deal with battery-powered electric buses as well as hydrogen fuel cell buses. And she's out of Palm Springs, but a lot of her curriculum is portable. And so we are really working to make sure the workforce is prepared for what the future will look like. But I think that's still developing, and it's definitely not going to be the way it looks today. But we're trying to prepare for everything we know that exists today and have programs in place that can be added to as we know new technology comes into the market.
Great, thank you.
I think I see our board member extraordinaire, Doug.
Thank you very much. Doug Tisdale, Chairman of the Board of the Regional Transportation District in Denver. Just to close out with a thought. It is very easy and very fashionable to bash the government, to bash the administration, to do nothing but talk negatively about what has not been done. And I want to be a spokesperson on behalf of those who say, thank you for all that you have been able to get done, for all that you have accomplished. That was a compelling video, and that video tells only a portion of the story. And so on behalf of many of us here, thank you for all of that.
And on that very high note, we will close this session. Thank you so
It's a
very
hard
much,
act to follow.
FTA.
I know.
Thank you, Doug.